Although some artists achieve legendary status due to the quality of their work, others get this status due to the stories they have managed to preserve. Once upon a time, Artimus Pyle was Lynyrd Skynyrd's raging drummer. The illustrious Southern rock group whose compositions, such as Free Bird and Sweet Home Alabama, have stood the test of time. As Pyle took the stage, his long hair, brilliant eyes, and drumming style exuded a soulful Southern sound. He exuded not just musical prowess but also an air of frantic uncertainty, as if each performance were a fight for his life. Neither the studio nor the spotlights of the stage were the settings of the bloodiest conflict of his life. Tragically, his closest bandmates were killed on a moonless night in 1977 when their plane went down in the Mississippi woods. After escaping the disaster, Artimus crawled through kilometers of darkness to get assistance, his body covered in blood and his ribs fractured. At that very second, his role as a drummer changed. The deadly fall that shattered Skynyrd's heart was witnessed by no one else but him. However, making it through was just the first step. In the decades that followed, Artimus Pyle would suffer a different type of wound, one that was not caused by steel but by charges that caused the entire world to abandon him. He, too, would be cast into the shadows of the industry, where a single accusation has the power to destroy an entire legacy, after having been honored by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and acclaimed by crowds as a hero. There is no question of right or wrong in this narrative. Music was more than just a love for this man. It was the only way for him to not be forgotten as he went through glory, weathered sorrow, and lived in the gray space between the light and the dark. Is Free Bird a song you're familiar with? And then, with blood, tears, and things that will never be washed away, prepare to hear the story of the man who kept time for that song. Background: Artimus's real name, Thomas Delmer Pyle, came into this world in Louisville, Kentucky on July 15, 1948. Clarence Del Pyle was a Purple Heart recipient and World War II veteran. He was his son's father. He said that his family's working-class background provided the source of rhythm in my heart in the form of discipline, nature, and mechanical noise. As a little girl, Artimus spent her days in the company of wild horses and farm machinery. When he was 7 years old, he had a terrible fall while riding bareback in Tennessee, where he had lived with his grandparents. However, he initially started to perceive the tempo of the world in that remote rural area. As Artimus sat on his grandfather's bulldozer one day, he had the epiphany that the engine's constant hum might be turned into music. The young boy's passion for drums was kindled at that same instant when machinery became a heartbeat. Mildred, his mother, gave him a bongo set when he was 9 years old. When he was 12 years old, his dad brought home a beat-up Slingerland drum set. It was the one present he would always remember. Even though he didn't start drumming for the fame, young Artimus did so because it helped him find his place in a world that wasn't always kind. During his time in high school, his family relocated to Columbus, Ohio. From 1966 to 1967, he was a student at Eastmore High School in that area. His crazy flair and innate rhythmic control earned him spots in numerous student bands during his adolescence. His friends gave him the mythical moniker Artimus, which he carried with him forever in recognition of his infant face and the fierceness of his drumming. He enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps in 1968, when the Vietnam War was heating up. His 3 years of duty taught him discipline, perseverance, and the ropes. He rose through the ranks to sergeant as an aircraft ordnance technician. He returned from his 1971 military service not with a firearm but with a vow and some drumsticks. He might be able to make it through a musical performance if he could make it through combat. Without glitz or major tragedy, it was a childhood of isolation, routine, survival instincts, and an eerie, unsettling noise. The primordial rumble within a little lad who had an innate sense of being unique. Perhaps that's the reason he was able to live a life that no one else could have imagined. Artimus Pyle did not come back from his military service in the early 1970s with a well-defined strategy for his career. One thing was all he knew. He had to learn drumming. He performed everywhere from little Florida bars to temporary platforms at community festivals, not because he wanted to be famous, but because he had no other choice. As he wandered aimlessly through the American South during those restless years, he became a member of a number of bands, but none of them gained the notoriety or popularity he needed to escape obscurity. Until an unexpected turn of events brought him his big break. A member of Lynyrd Skynyrd from its inception, Bob Burns opted to resign away as drummer in 1974. Exhausted at the height of the band's success, Skynyrd was in a state of turmoil as they were getting ready to release their third album, Nothing Fancy. They were in search of a drummer who possessed not just technical prowess but also the mental fortitude to weather the incessant traveling schedule and grasp the true essence of Southern rock. An old acquaintance of Ronnie Van Zant's, Charlie Daniels, is a seasoned musician who introduced Artimus. The entire studio went silent as Pyle performed with such passion and feeling during an impromptu audition. He didn't merely keep time. Avoid drawn-out discussions. "I don't need a drummer," Ronnie gazed at him before responding. Artimus Pyle made one of the most consequential decisions of his life when he said, I need someone who can survive the road with me. Lynyrd Skynyrd was formally joined. From 1975's Nothing Fancy, his debut album, the enthusiasm that Pyle provided was new. His drumming lacked the precision of pop and the ferocity of hard rock. A heartbeat that knows it's doing something risky but just can't stop, like wheels moving over dusty back roads that had the rhythm of the South. As a result of having him at the helm, Skynyrd became even more explosive and raw while remaining steady. Not long after that, the band hit its peak, and Artimus Pyle, who had been a forgotten ex-Marine before, became a crucial cog in the wheel that rocked America. However, he retained his origins in all his endeavors. Wearing his battered military boots, he stood even at Madison Square Garden's backstage. Something to keep in mind quietly, the boundary between heaven and hell is not as thick as we imagine. He was the only one who could have known it. Achieving professional success? Lynyrd Skynyrd was at the height of his fame and Artimus Pyle's career between 1974 and 1977. Nothing Fancy, Gimme Back My Bullets, One More from the Road, and Street Survivors were just a few of the band's smash hits that captivated millions of listeners with its explosive southern rock, honest lyrics, and gritty yet noble sound. Much like Artimus's drumming. As a drummer, he wasn't the type to seek out showy solos. Artimus' drumming was aggressive, rough-edged, and never offbeat, as if he were narrating a voyage. His drumming in Saturday Night Special sounded like catastrophe was on the verge of striking. Gimme 3 Steps had all the excitement of a thrilling getaway. When he was there, Skynyrd felt like more than simply a southern band. They felt tighter and more alive. Yet a cultural icon of the American working class. Backstage, Artimus was known as the untamed, uncontrolled individual, the one who would confront management directly or stray miles from the tour route in order to visit a tiny village. He was dreadfully methodical and exacting when performing music, too. His approach is one of playing each song as if it were his final. The following year, 1977, brought a new record, tour, and shocking finale. As the band was making their way to Baton Rouge, Louisiana from Gillsburg, Mississippi, on October 20, 1977, their Convair CV-240 jet crashed into the swampy woods. All that Skynyrd had worked for, her friendships, her future, it was all destroyed in that split second between flying and landing. Instantaneous fatalities occurred among 3 crew members, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, and Ronnie Van Zant. Even though he had 3 fractured ribs and blood pooling on his chest, Artimus Pyle managed to get up after being hurled from the debris. After trudging through the forest for 400 meters, he made it to a nearby farmhouse, where he begged for assistance. In response to the terrifying sight of a bloodied man emerging from the shadows, the homeowner shot a warning shot, but Artimus continued on her mission. "A jet has crashed," he shouted, "and every one of them is succumbing to the consequences." Artimus Pyle shambling through the darkness, covered in blood, with insects flying about him and bodies trailing after, became a chilling symbol in American music history. He was unharmed in the crash, but the years of music, friendships, and wild beauty that he had experienced were permanently lost in the forest. Music would never be the same after the fall. Despite his tragic past, Artimus Pyle has come out on the other side, not just as a famous drummer, but as the sole survivor of Skynyrd's sacred promise to finish the story they were unable to. What happened in the years after the tragic accident? While America mourned the loss of Ronnie Van Zant and the other musicians in the 1977 plane tragedy, Artimus Pyle remained out of the public eye. Subtly, he stepped back. He was a student in a Jewish yeshiva in Israel 3 years after the catastrophe. At that period, he refrained from discussing music or playing the drums. It was not a pause for Pyle. Once again, it was a means of subsistence. Upon his return to the United States in the early 1980s, he established the independent Southern band the Artimus Pyle Band, or APB. Simple, unmotivated by profit. Not for fame or fortune, but as a tribute to the music that Skynyrd had come so close to losing, APB was born. Though Pyle's involvement with Lynyrd Skynyrd's 1987 reunion tour was brief, he did take part in it. Subtle conflicts, unresolved hurts, and the sense of being ignored caused him to withdraw entirely. You'd think life would give him some serenity after such a horrible fall. However, an even more brutal event followed the crash. 2 young girls, who were stepdaughters of Artimus Pyle's ex-girlfriend, were accused of sexually molesting Pyle in 1993. The state of Florida made the information public. Attempting capital sexual battery is one of the gravest offenses in the United States, and he faced that charge. He might have faced life in jail if found guilty. Full denial from Pyle. He claimed it was an effort to tarnish his good name and a trap that had its roots in animosity in the past. He didn't confess guilt but also didn't dispute the punishment. He took a no-contest plea deal because he was afraid of losing everything due to legal pressure. And what was the outcome? A sex offender registry was a condition of his 8-year probationary term. Everything fell apart after that. The bookings of numerous shows were canceled. He was once associated with Free Bird, but the radio no longer played his music. currently has done nothing but sow discord and mistrust. Some saw Artimus Pyle's transformation from survivor to letdown. His failure to update his address in the sex offender registry, which is a legal requirement in several U.S. states, led to his arrest once again in November 2007. On this occasion, he spoke up. Like a drummer battling a tempest to keep a band together, he confronted the legal system in court. He was found not guilty 2 years later by the court. Judgments do not, however, rehabilitate reputations. Although the 1977 crash was the main reason people remembered him, the nearly 20-year-old moniker sex offender also stuck. Pyle kept on performing music with APB, sneaking about on tour and recording behind the scenes. In addition to composing and telling anecdotes, he occasionally broke down in tears while discussing Ronnie Van Zant. However, they no longer saw the old hero in the same light. Festivals declined to work together. Cancellation of concerts was petitioned by some fans. Venues go so far as to post signage. Sex offenders are not welcome here. In 2020, he recounted the full incident in the documentary Street Survivors, which was based on the real-life account of the plane crash involving Lynyrd Skynyrd. His goal was to restore the voice that had been stifled by the term scandal. Still, the truth never appeared powerful enough to dispel the uncertainty, regardless of how often he repeated it. Some others think Artimus is the brave soul who emerged from the rubble to summon rescuers. In the eyes of others, he is the one who was too scared to seek a genuine not guilty finding in court. Maybe deep down in his soul, he'll always have to choose between the hero who rescued the band and the villain everyone shunned. Private life. If Artimus Pyle's career as a musician was a whirlwind tour across fiery stages and broken moments, then his private life was a symphony, at once serene, at times dramatic, and most of the time puzzling to everyone around him. The specifics of Artimus's marriages have always remained undisclosed, despite the fact that he had 5 children from an early age. He stepped back after the 1977 plane crash, which left him shaken. Avoiding the limelight of the entertainment industry in favor of bringing up his children, he appeared to seek solace in the North Carolina mountains for a while, engaging in gardening, horseback riding, and the restoration of vintage mechanical equipment, a life devoid of gossip and pressure to prove himself. In spite of her Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Artimus remained a dedicated vegetarian and shunned luxury. He frequently mentioned escaping into nature, meditation, and simplicity as methods to avoid becoming mired in the past. He never concealed his suffering, though. The finest years of my life, together with my reputation, trust, and friends, were snatched away. I am not requesting pardon. Being a human being is all I really desire. Artimus kept a tight bond with his children, showing them affection via deeds rather than words. He took them on a tour once to give them a taste of the real deal for musicians. The rockstar lifestyle was not something he instilled in them. He showed them how to persevere when all odds are against them. He had to shed blood and tears to realize that. But the incident of 1993 put a shadow over his private life as well. The long years he spent on the sex offender registry were difficult for his loved ones. He avoided talking about his personal life in interviews, not to avoid talking about it, but because, as he put it, the fewer words, the less pain, and some family and friends stopped calling. Artimus' patience was the most outstanding aspect of her private life. He avoided the media spotlight at all costs, never once trying to reassert his innocence or provide an explanation. All he did was keep pounding out drum beats, as if every heartbeat were a silent confession, a gentle gesture of self-forgiveness, and a gentle nudge. I'm still here, whether you remember me or not. In a world where scandal can devour everything, Artimus Pyle chose to live quietly, not because he had nothing to say, but because in the end, he knew what truly remained were the people still willing to listen. Legacy and influence. Though Artimus Pyle's life was divided between musical glory and personal scandal, no one can deny